The air in Conakry, Guinea, was unusually still that night. January 20th, 1973. A brittle tension hovered over the PAIC, African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, headquarters, as if the city sensed something about to shatter its fragile calm. Just weeks before, Amílcar Cabral, engineer, poet, revolutionary, had rallied his comrades with an optimism that shook colonial foundations. His words carried the weight of freedom, not only for Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, but for oppressed people across Africa. But that night, bullets would silence one of Africa's most visionary leaders. The betrayal came not from Portuguese assassins, but from within his own ranks, men he had trusted, trained, and led. This is the story of that betrayal, of how a revolution lost its compass, and of how Amílcar Cabral's assassination became one of the deepest wounds in the African struggle for liberation. Amílcar Cabral was more than a revolutionary. Born in 1924 in Bafata, Guinea-Bissau, to Cape Verdean parents, he was an intellectual bridge between two colonized archipelagos. After studying agronomy in Lisbon, he returned home with more than just a degree. He brought with him radical ideas of self-determination, dignity, and anti-colonial resistance. Cabral founded the PAIC in 1956, and by the early 1960s, he had transformed it from a modest political movement into a fierce guerrilla force. His leadership fused Marxist ideology with a deep cultural awareness. He knew that true liberation wasn't just about political independence. It was about reclaiming African identity. While other leaders called for war, Cabral called for consciousness. "Claim no easy victories," he often said, and his soldiers repeated it like a mantra. From jungle encampments to rural villages, he inspired peasants to rise, not just with guns, but with purpose. By 1972, PAIC had gained substantial ground in its fight against Portuguese colonialism. The party controlled more than two-thirds of Guinea-Bissau's territory, and international recognition of its legitimacy was growing. But victory came at a cost. As the war intensified, so did the internal pressure. The PAIGC was a melting pot of ethnic groups, interests, and ideologies. Some commanders grew envious of Cabral's authority, while others questioned his strategy of gradual independence and diplomacy. There were whispers. Cabral was too intellectual, too cautious, too Cape Verdean. At the same time, the Portuguese were investing heavily in psychological warfare, exploiting tribal tensions and attempting to divide the movement from within. Lisbon's intelligence services, PIDE/DGS, had identified a weakness. If they couldn't kill Cabral from the outside, maybe they could help someone do it from within. Among Cabral's closest allies was his half-brother, Luis Cabral, and a cadre of military leaders stationed in Conakry, where the PAIGC had established its base after being forced out of Guinea-Bissau cities. But it was here, in what should have been the heart of the revolution, that the rot began. A group of disgruntled PAIGC members, led by Inocencio Cani, began to plot against the leadership. Their grievances were mixed, some personal, some political. They believed Cabral's authority was stifling the military wing, and they demanded more direct control. It's unclear whether Portuguese intelligence helped organize the conspiracy, but what is certain is this: they benefited from it. Documents later found suggested that Cabral's assassination was known, perhaps even encouraged by Portuguese agents operating in Dakar and Bissau. The plotters chose a symbolic target, the man whose words were stronger than bullets. It was around 9:30 p.m. when Amílcar Cabral's car pulled into the driveway of his home in the upper-class neighborhood of Dixin, Conakry. He had just returned from a meeting with Guinean President Ahmed Sékou Touré, discussing the next steps in the final push for independence. Cabral's wife, Ana Maria, was beside him. As they stepped out of the car, shadows moved in the darkness. Gunmen emerged from the bushes, men Cabral knew, PAIGC guards, his own men. They seized Ana Maria and forced her back into the car. Cabral resisted. According to eyewitnesses, he demanded to know what was happening. That's when the shots rang out. 3 bullets hit him. 1 pierced his heart. Cabral collapsed on the gravel path, dead before he hit the ground. The assassins fled, but chaos spread quickly. Within hours, arrests were made. The plotters were caught, but the damage was irreversible. News of Cabral's death sent shockwaves across Africa. Guinea-Bissau wept. Cape Verde fell silent. Angola mourned. Mozambique trembled. Revolutionaries across the continent understood. This was more than a political killing. It was a symbolic decapitation of a movement driven by intellect, unity, and humanity. Guinean President Sékou Touré was devastated and furious. He had considered Cabral a brother. Within days, those involved in the plot were executed by firing squad. Guinea wanted blood, but the PAGC wanted justice. Louis Cabral, grief-stricken, stepped into his brother's shoes, but he would never command the same respect. Amílcar's funeral was held with military honors in Conakry. Thousands came, students, farmers, foreign diplomats, guerrilla fighters. They laid red carnations on his coffin, the same flower that would later become a symbol of revolution in Portugal. But behind the solemnity, a dangerous question lingered. If Cabral could be killed by his own, who was safe in the revolution? Though silenced, Cabral's voice only grew louder in death. His speeches, recorded on scratchy tapes and smuggled across borders, continued to inspire resistance. His writings were studied in Havana, Algiers, and New York. The likes of Che Guevara, Kwame Nkrumah, and Frantz Fanon regarded him as a brother in arms. A year after his assassination, Guinea-Bissau declared independence, a dream Cabral had not lived to see. The Portuguese regime would fall in 1974 after the Carnation Revolution, a bloodless military coup largely triggered by the costs of colonial wars. But something was missing. The moral compass of the PAGC was gone. Without Cabral's guiding philosophy, the movement fragmented. Corruption crept in. Tribal tensions re-emerged. The unity he had so carefully built began to crumble. Still, Cabral's ideas outlived the revolution. He had taught his people not just to fight, but to think. He believed in education, in dignity, in reclaiming African heritage from the ashes of colonialism. His quote still echoes in political science halls and guerrilla training camps alike. Culture is simultaneously the fruit of a people's history and a determinant of history. Who exactly ordered Cabral's assassination remains a mystery. Some believe the Portuguese knew every detail but allowed the plot to unfold, confident it would fracture the resistance. Others point to a power struggle within the PAIGC, a military faction uncomfortable with Cabral's civilian, diplomatic leadership. Declassified documents from Portuguese archives released decades later confirm that PAID had a priority operation aimed at eliminating PAIGC's leadership, with Cabral at the top of the list. But no evidence directly links them to the night of January 20th. Historians now agree on one thing. The assassination was a tragedy of lost potential. Cabral was not just a wartime strategist. He was a peacetime planner. Had he lived, many believe Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde might have developed into more stable, democratic nations. His death remains one of the most devastating internal betrayals in Africa's anti-colonial history. Today in Conakry, you can still visit the house where Cabral fell. A marble plaque marks the spot. His image hangs in classrooms across Lusophone Africa. His books are studied worldwide. His words are tattooed on the hearts of those who fight for justice. But on that cold January night, as his blood seeped into the gravel of his garden, something deeper was lost. The belief that revolutions are always immune from self-destruction. Amílcar Cabral had dreamed of a free and united Africa, one built not just on independence, but on self-respect and cultural pride. In death, he became a martyr. In life, he had been something rarer, a revolutionary who refused to become a tyrant, and perhaps that is why he had to die. Subscribe to Shadows of Power Africa for more powerful stories the world tried to bury.